This is gonna be good.
This is going to be very good. I cannot wait for it.
One more drink and then it'll be excellent. Very good to excellent.
Yes, love coffee. Much having it.
Cheers. Cheers, mate.
Oh, look at that. Technical difficulties already.
No, that's called clumsy. You clumsy dolt. Okay, fix your parenting mistakes.
Let's do it.
Like right now.
I'm done with
Like
it.
ready to go.
I already fixed it.
Already fixed. And put that last little tighten that hold. There we go. All right.
I just learned, this is completely random. I just learned that Elon Musk put a fart noise onto the Tesla when it goes to back up, like on one particular model, because he's such a child.
Like just one random car that somebody's gonna buy.
No. There's an entire one model that every time it, like he made it be like it when you put it in reverse, it goes.
That's so ridiculous.
He's just such a kid. Anyways, be interesting to see what
you
he
heard
did
it
with
here on the
Space
Shrink Think podcast. Okay, ready, set, record. Hey everyone, welcome to the Shrink Think podcast. As always, we are depressed to be here. No, just kidding. We are very excited to be here talking about how to help you fix your parenting mistakes. Nathan is our resident expert because he's already fixed his.
That's
He's
right.
done.
If you're on YouTube, you figured that out.
And if you can see him, he is wiping his hands clean like, did that. Job well done.
Yes.
No, we're talking about, like, if you are a parent and you've had children, whether they're young kids or whether they're adult children.
I'm just thinking, who if a parent has to have children.
If you are a parent but you don't have children, listen to this episode preemptively.
Okay. We're not gonna make it. We're trying. What we're focused on though, mainly in this episode is adult parents. So meaning like of adult children. So your kid's out. They have by out meaning, well, actually these days maybe your kid isn't out if they're in the good old
If
years
they're
of
out,
A.
then they're not out, then they're in.
I mean, a lot of kids, quote unquote, are 26 years old and still living with their parents. That's actually pretty normal these days. But that's kind of the age we're thinking is like as a parent somewhere in there.
Like that and older. It'd be like, at a certain point in time, you grow up, you develop your own life, maybe you get yourself established, whether you have a job, career, and or your own family. Maybe you start having your own kids, something like that. And at that point, you start to transition in your relationship with your parents. Maybe you reconnect, or maybe you are evaluating some of the things from your own childhood, and you're realizing these things happen, and I want to repair that. And probably, if you're a parent with your children, you're like in your 20s, 30s, maybe even in your 40s, and you're having kids. Your parents are more involved in your life because of your children, because of their grandchildren. So there's like a little bit more of a connection or a reason to be interacting. And maybe even you're observing them interact with your kids, their grandchildren, in a way that's different from what you experienced. And you're like, hey, where was this when I was a kid, But specifically, we're focused on the parent, that we would be talking like to the grandparents, the parents who raised you.
Well, the potential grandparents. I mean, that may not be in the cards yet.
Right.
But the reality is that kind of time of life where you're a bit more reflective, in the sense that, I mean, there's a lot of change that happens. You know this as you get older, because you start to realize that things are not as perfect as they seem. They never were. It's like you wake up to things just kind of stink. Like I did my best, and here we are. And also, it's hard to confront some of that because it's like you don't want to be. I think a lot of us, if you get older kids, it's hard to be honest with yourself to realize, like, man, I tried my hardest, and I probably some of that is. I mean, you watch for if you do have your kids do have grandkids, you can watch how they're parenting, and then you think, oh, okay, they probably learned that from me. That's not the greatest move. Like, you wouldn't even necessarily do that now, but it's like and you don't know necessarily how to have that conversation with your kid either, because it's like coming from a place that you created.
Yeah, and to be honest, it's really uncomfortable. Like I think that's a great example, because when you see those things, when you see those things in these children, or in, like, whether they're little kids or whether they are the adult children, your kids that are parenting, you recognize that behavior or whatever. Maybe there's even some moment of awareness of like, ooh, that's not good. But the problem is, like, you might just be filled with so much regret, or it might just be so overwhelming that's like, oh, I messed up and it's bad. And like all of this, like, big generalized and, like, really bad stuff starts happening in your head and in your emotions, that you just get filled with maybe just overwhelming, like, shame and anxiety, that it's
Guilt.
Guilt. That's the word I was looking for. This guilt that you've done this and it, and there's nothing you can do because you can't undo it, and it just is what it is. And but you have a hard time getting over it. I think that's also the other part of it, is that it's done. The deed is done. The kids are grown up, right? You can't go back and undo any of that. And of course, if you're a parent of younger kids and you realize some of this, then we're hoping you're listening and realizing it's not too late. And I've even asked, or had clients ask, when their kids are teenagers or tweens, is it too late? No, it's not. It's never too late.
Well, and the thing of it is there's another side to this. So the other side is that you're the parent that I'm talking to right now, who is like, I don't know why we're talking about this. Like, let's just focus on the positive. Look, my kid is doing pretty well. They got a job. They're out of the house. They're killing it. I don't know, this whole new generational thing where people are wanting to talk about everything is kind of like overkill and maybe dumb. It's like, we didn't need to do that when we were younger. I mean, I don't know what the big deal is now.
That's actually a really good point, because if you're one of those people and you're listening to this episode, you're like, why is somebody having me listen to this episode? This is dumb.
Yeah, because you
I don't
did
need
not
this.
choose this episode.
Right.
Did not happen.
We're not out there looking like, what, I think I need to work on my relationship with my kids, my adult kids.
So if you are listening to this episode, welcome, because they want you
right.
to work on the relationship with them.
And we're going to tell you something that maybe they've tried to tell you, or maybe they haven't really said it directly, but they've kind of hinted at you by getting you to listen to this episode, and maybe even you didn't even know how to access a podcast. So they're
The other thing is maybe they're afraid of certain death, the kids. Like, because you are going to, like, give them that look.
Right. You're going to axe them after you.
Yeah.
After you
gotta
listen.
be on YouTube for this one.
Yeah.
YouTube is a channel, a video service that's on the internet.
Like Channel 49?
Not like Channel 49.
So if I pick up the remote and turn the TV on, how do I access it?
Yeah. I was the remote control when I was a kid. My dad would be like, "Hey, Nate, can you change the channel to 13?" And I go up there with the dial. Click, 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 click,
I thought you said you were going to say you were remote for like Halloween or something.
A remote. Like, oh my goodness. Halloween's too close for your brain.
I can picture that.
We should probably focus before we're dead.
Yeah, we're dead. So back on track. So if you're a parent and you have some tension or some conflict in your relationship with your kids, or maybe even it's not as close as you think it should be, or they're telling you that there are some problems and they want to try to resolve these, and maybe you don't even know what they're talking about, this episode is for you. I guess one of the first things that we want to say is that, kind of as a blanket statement for all parents, you're going to mess up your children. It's a given. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of how, right? Because even great parents who have done many things well will miss some other thing. Like, for example, if you're a parent and you've provided, maybe you've done very well for yourself. You are, two intact, still married parents. You've made good money. Your kids did not lack for anything. You put them in sports or in music their whole lives, and they have lots of friends. Maybe they went to college and went off and got good jobs. By all accounts, all those things are good things, right? Those are kind of like signposts of successful parenting in a certain sense. But maybe they did not get the emotional attention, or they did not get the acknowledgement that they needed, or the support that they needed through something in their lives. And it's not because you didn't care. I mean, you went to all the, band concerts and performances and all the sporting events or whatever, but there was just something else that was missed because you're not a perfect person. Like, that's going to happen.
And well, and the reality is that these kids, quote unquote, which are probably actually our age, mainly, and older, so in their 40s, maybe 50s, have gone probably to some therapy, and then they start realizing, like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was that big of a deal. But when you think of, like, it's like throwing a rock in a pond. I mean, the ripple effect, when you have just a glass pond, it's just so pure, like clean and flat.
Still.
And you throw throw a rock out there, eventually those ripples get to the edge. And when in therapy we look at stuff and then find out it's like somebody starts and they're really starting at the edge because that's what they notice. And then the rock that's thrown in might not actually be like that big of a deal. Like, what I mean by that is like Aaron, what you were saying. I mean, if somebody was impoverished, that's a big rock. I mean, you're talking about a lot of things. It's a struggle, bro, like trying to like live alone. But if you have everything kind of laid out for you, the simple rocks are like, to what extent, for example, did the attention you gave your children come from literally just giving them things for what their needs are? But what people are always going to want is human connection. That's what they want. So really what's happening is, and what we're really talking about, are the points at which the human connection was less than what was needed. That's really the end of it. So in light of that, it does matter that you went to the band concert.
A lot. It matters a lot.
Yeah, because I could tell you stories in counseling where that was the main thing that people struggle with, is parents not going. But the reality is how are you when you're there? I mean, there's all kinds of like, did you just show up and walk in and like you were gone before the thing was over? I mean, that kind of thing.
And it is tricky because each person is individual, meaning like they are unique in who they are. And if you have multiple kids, then they are different from each other. They can be similar in some ways, but they're also different in personality and different in needs. And the reason I'm saying that is because your kids need to be loved, or they need that connection in unique ways that are unique to them. That's what makes parenting so tricky, is like some kids need a lot of attention and some kids need less attention, or some kids need this kind of attention and connection and other kids need a different kind of attention.
And here's another one, Aaron. If you had multiple children, there's a good shot that you liked one of them more. And by that I mean it was just easier for you to hang out with them.
And even if you didn't like them more, you just might have been more like you, and it was like, oh, that's easy.
Right.
And so they just got a side of you maybe that you understood better and got along with better, and the other one or other ones were different from you, and it was just more challenging to you. It doesn't mean you didn't like or love them that way. It just means it was a little bit harder to give that connection. And so I guess what we're saying is you're going to mess your kids up in some way. If you can kind of accept that as a premise, that means you're not a bad person. It means you're a human being standing in line like every single other human parent that's ever existed, to own up to and admit to and recognize the ways in which you impacted your children. And so from that starting point, it's like, okay, let's kind of drop the guilt and drop the shame, because if it's just normal, then it's like, okay, how? It's sort of like we're in a doctor's office and it's not like, oh, you have a problem too? I can't believe it. No, it's like if you're in the doctor's office, you're like, oh, what are you here for, right? We just assume that everyone's got some problem, so it's kind of like, what's your issue?
Right.
We all got it.
And I'm not responsible for being sick.
That's right.
It's a little different what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think to start off this is what do you do first, right? When it comes to things, what you want to do first. So your kid, quote unquote, I still say that because we're talking about adults here.
Right.
Basically says they want to talk to you. And you're like, sure, that's fine. But then you start to find out that this is going to be deeper than this because you can feel the tension because you know your kid. What we're suggesting that you do is just kind of be there, be curious, and be open. That's kind of the first thing to do, because what's happening, we've talked about somewhat what's happening, or the situation that could be the setup, but really what's happening is this kid is trying to have a closer relationship with you. They are not trying to get you or play got you.
Or make you feel terrible, or like put your nose in the poo. like you would with a dog back in the day. It's like they don't want to make you feel worse. They want you to see what happens so you can sort of admit to it so that they can be like, see, I'm not crazy.
Right. And well, and all of that too is about, we've talked before about validation, totally different episode, but as humans, we need, validation is not agreement. You're not agreeing to, oh yes, I did that with all of the same intent that you thought I did. The reason why is because I wanted to hurt you. That's not what's happening.
I've got a great example. I remember, and this is common for like teen boys, they sort of keep to themselves in high school, or it's harder to talk to them. And I remember feeling like, pretty alone and like nobody was there for me or whatever. And I asked my parents about this, and they're like, we try to talk to you all the time. And, as I thought about it, I was like, well, can both things be true? Can they did those actions, right? And I wasn't having anything to do with it as a teenager. And so it's like, I'm not agreeing with them, but I'm like, oh yeah, I can see how you did that. And if they were the parents, listening to this episode, they can be like, well, we did try to talk to him, but he still had this experience, and I can understand that. And those experiences and feelings are real, so let me be open to them.
Right. So as we're kind of thinking about this and trying to help this parent here, I guess what I'm wondering, Aaron, is at what point do we give the help? Is it on the receiver end when the person is coming in, like the adult kid is asking, or is it more like at the meeting when the meeting was happening between do you see what I mean? So let's meet at a coffee shop that time, or they get this letter in the mail, they get an email saying like, I had this happen. I had a client get an email of like, I'm not talking to you again unless we talk with a counselor.
Right.
And so that was a whole thing in and of itself. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I think this is actually probably a good time. We thought this would be a really good time to bring in a couple of actual like parents, guys, and particularly guys. We're trying to, guys don't do therapy. They don't whatever as much. They don't.
Well, some guys do.
I mean, we do, right? You and I, and our guys from Vegas. What up, guys? But it's less common, right? Women are typically the people that go to therapy and want to work on their relationships or whatever. But so we thought we'd kind of bring in a couple of guys. So we've got a couple of guests here, Arthur Collins and Luther Lexington from Great Britain. They are a couple of dads that they've got adult children, and we thought we'd just sort of interview them and ask them a couple of questions of like, because they've gone through this. We met them through some colleagues or whatever, and it's like, hey, we're doing this episode, and they were sort of sharing about this. It's like, oh, you guys would be perfect for our show. Tell us a little bit about your experiences as like, adults, as parents. Like, what do you experience? What is this like for you to hear, because you've gone through this? So Arthur and Luther, welcome to the show.
It's like totally great to be here. Really, really love it. Don't really know what to expect actually. I'm Luther Lexington. Been living in the old Queensland now for my whole freaking life actually. And anyways, what's your? Is this Arthur?
Yes, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So guys, what's your experience? I mean, you've had some of these experiences with your children confronting you, hey, we'd like to be closer. Why are we not closer? I mean, I have some ideas of, what happened in my childhood or whatever. Like, what was that like for you to hear from your adult children?
I can tell you one thing for sure. The first thing I thought was, why the heck are we having this bloody conversation? There's no talking about this. We're moving on, right? Am I right? I mean, first of all, they're telling me about, Daddy, I wanted to know more when I was a little kid and get closer to you, and you were not there. You know what? Because I was dealing with a freaking war, man.
I guess I had the exact opposite experience. I was quite receptive. I was surprised to hear the things that I was told, but I trusted that I love my children and I wanted to be open to their experiences, and it was actually quite enlightening for me. I learned many things from a different perspective that I had not known before, and it opened my eyes to their perspective that was quite valuable for improving our relationship. So unlike Luther, I actually listened and I responded with compassion because I did not want my children experiencing those things, but they were telling me this is exactly what they experienced.
Well, that's like really stuffy, isn't it? I mean, come on, man. It's like you're not even a real human being.
But Luther, you've got to be open to your children's experiences that they're different than yours, even if it's uncomfortable for you, which it was for me. I remember feeling quite stuffy actually. Like I just wanted to run, I wanted to shut down and not hear it because I could not bear the thought of my children feeling all of those ways and that I had caused it. The guilt was massive.
Okay, I know this is a mental health program, so I guess the only thing I'm going to say here is that one thing that I did think about is the reality that I wasn't really around very much. So I admitted to that, didn't I? I was like, yep, wasn't there. Sorry about that. I was making this thing called a living so you could breathe air and eat, and there's a little roof over the top of your head.
So Luther, thank you for acknowledging that, and also Arthur, I want to thank you for sharing your experience as well. But Luther, what? Just briefly here, we've only got a couple minutes, but what stops you from going farther with that? I mean, so like you're focusing on all the things you did do. Why is it so hard for you to focus on the things that you didn't do?
I mean, ultimately, I think it's because I'm stuck, right? I can't do anything more than I'm doing.
But you can, I guess, right now. That's kind of the point. Is if your kids are coming to you right now, presently, they're like, "Hey, I want to improve this." Like we can't change the past, but presently, right now, we can change the present, which will make a new relationship for the future. I mean, do you want that with your kids, or do you just want to stay stuck?
I mean, to be honest, I thought it was fine until I've heard all this. But when you put it that way, it's actually kind of interesting because I guess it not focus as much on what I've done, but what I could do. So, I mean, if it sounds a little bit more productive that way, but I don't want everything dragged through the mud I don't know, like want to hear about it all the time.
And I guess the problem, the reason, I totally understand that, right? It's really uncomfortable. You said drag through the mud. It can feel that way for sure. And, Arthur, I'm sure that's how it felt for you as well, going through this. But after you go through that experience, really, it stops being about you, right? Because this is about your kid and their experience, not about you and your experience.
Okay, here's the thing. Do they actually know what you're talking about, all the blubber you're saying? Do the kids actually believe this mental jargon you're saying?
Luther, you are the one who's mental. I can tell you from my personal experiences that with my children, after I did all of these exercises, I contacted Aaron and Nathan, and they helped me through all of those difficult family relationships, that things have improved quite nicely. We talk like maybe once or twice a week, and it's quite deep, it's quite personal. They share lots of things with me, many more things that they did not share before because they did not feel safe. There was this chasm between us that ultimately I can see was this experience that you're having now. It's my own feelings of guilt that I did not want to look at, that once I dropped those walls, I was much more open to those relationships, and they've improved quite nicely.
Okay, so Arthur, what was the crucial kind of the change point for you?
Ultimately, I decided I've got a decision to make. I can choose me, or I can choose my children. I can choose the feelings that I had for myself, my guilt and my shame, all these things that were like barriers between me and them, or I could choose to move toward them and drop those things and see a different perspective than my own. And ultimately, that was, to me, what was the most loving thing to do.
So what you are saying, your buy-in was just simply being a parent.
That's true.
I mean, you're really just doing the same thing you did as a younger parent and trying to put your kids first.
Ultimately, I think I had this awareness that I had not been doing that properly as a younger parent, but as an older parent with adult children, I wanted to do that, but I had much more objectivity, much more perspective. After having stepped back from that role for several years, I could see where I'd gone wrong and do it much better.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Luther, do you have any closing thoughts? I mean, yeah, this is actually really interesting when you think about it, because actually I was putting my kids first a long time ago. That's why I left. I realize it doesn't make any sense when I'm saying it out loud to myself, but the reality is I had to go get a job. I had to have food. I didn't really think I was that important, actually. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, ultimately, like this process, and it is a process, of awareness and discovery about yourself, things you didn't necessarily know about yourself. As a parent, that as time goes on, you learn and you become aware and you want to improve those things. And maybe you didn't know all of them while your kids were younger, and as children. And as they've grown up and gotten older, it's still not too late. The thing I said earlier about teenagers still applies to adult children, because if they're coming to you and they want to have a relationship with you now, it's still not too late. So we got to head for home and close this episode out. But Arthur Luther, I just wanted to say thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing some of your experiences. You guys are, really valuable insights to us. And I know it's kind of a personal thing, but thank you for being here and being on our show.
Hey guys, thanks a lot.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
It actually has been a little more fun than I actually thought. I like these microphones.
They're pretty fun, aren't they?
All right, everyone. Have a great day.
That was so good. I love that. It was so fun. I just want to do an entire episode, just always welcome to the British version.
Oh yeah,
we just
do the British version.
This is for our British audience, and then just record the same episode just with a British accent. Just record the same episode, and release it throughout the world or whatever.
Yeah, because then people take the British more seriously.
Yeah. Right. People think we're much smarter over there because we've got the British accent.
Yes, very stuffy. Doesn't really matter because people will actually listen to every freaking word that we say and hang on the balance. What's he going to say next?
And then we can welcome to the Shrink Think podcast, eh? We're recording live from Canada,
Yeah, everybody said, oh, that's Irish.
Welcome to the Shrimp Think Shrink Think podcast. We're so excited to be here.
Oh, it's going to be a good one, isn't it?
Today we're talking about potatoes.
I love to have some. You know what I love? Is bangers and mash. It's great.
What do you do when your mental health is suffering? You mash up the potatoes and you feel much better.
And you grab a wiener and eat it up. It's the bangers and mash. You gotta have. How did they ever come up with the word bangers anyway?
Oh my gosh, that's ridiculous.